and your perspective on.
Sapio has a product called Exemplar, which is a LIMS, ELN, and SDMS, and what we call the seamless lab, which is our terminology for the digital lab I'm going to talk about kind of extensively here today. So what's our mission at Sapio? What excites me personally is accelerating the discovery of drugs to, or products, it doesn't have to be drugs, to improve the human condition primarily. Especially at a time like this with COVID, we're seeing the importance of life sciences and having things go fast. And one thing about drug discovery is it's not been fast, 8 to 10 year pipeline to discover a new drug. And we certainly want to do what we can to make that faster. And I think the way to do that is to realize the digital lab, or what we call the seamless lab. All right, so a little bit of timeline about Sapio. Sapio actually didn't start as a LIMS vendor or an ELN vendor. We started as a machine learning vendor. Most people don't know that actually, but I think it's important to talk about that and then how that played into where we are today. So we introduced a product called Exemplar Informatics. This was for analyzing genetic data. And this was a great idea, but in 2004, the market was not really ready for machine learning analytics. And I think we were probably about 10 years too early there. So we had some modest success with that product. But then we realized that the market wasn't ready for that. So we decided that if the market wasn't ready for analytics of the resulting data from lab work, why don't we get involved in collecting and tracking the data that would ultimately someday be ready for machine learning analytics. So take the long game on this and start addressing, the collection of the data. So we decided to start in the LIMS market. In 2007, we introduced Exemplar LIMS version 1. I'll be frank and honest that we didn't really fully understand, what a LIMS needed to do at that point. We thus decided to create a platform. And this was appealing. It's intellectually appealing to create a platform because it's actually a lot harder to create a platform than create a purpose-built application like a LIMS or an ELN. But the idea of a platform is it's relatively agnostic application. So we decided to develop that because we felt like as we learned about what LIMS should do, we could build that on top of the platform. And if the platform was capable and done properly, that we could easily add functionality in there to get to the full-fledged LIMS capabilities that the market was telling us they needed. We saw quickly that labs want to track process, so we created a workflow engine that was a configurable workflow engine, and I believe we were one of the first to actually have what might be called a lab execution system, although it's not a very common nomenclature, but the ability to track stepwise process we introduced very early on. This was all thick client work. Obviously, the world was moving to web, so in 2014 we introduced our web client. And it's good we did. It really takes a long time to get the web world right. Getting performance, scalability, visual representation information is non-trivial in the web world. And the fact that we got an early start on this worked for our benefit, and getting us where we're at today in 2020. So then we realized, okay, now we're tracking lab process. Now we want to start tracking, experimental work. So we introduced an ELN in 2016, and again, we did kind of a clean sheet design of the ELN. And again, I'll be honest that we had a lot to learn. We actually designed a much more capable ELN than we needed to. It was over-engineered. I'll say that it was an over-engineered solution. It did too much. So we spent the time span between 2016 and 2020 in understanding how to simplify to the essential needs. We didn't want to lose the power that we put in the ELN in 2016. We wanted to retain a lot of the capability there in case people did desire to have that, but make the ease of use of the solution much, much better. And that's really been an iterative process. And I finally feel today in 2020, in September, that we finally have nailed that. I feel like we have world-class capability in terms of ease of use now with the September release of Seamless, and also the functionality level of the product is quite extraordinary. So we'll be showing you some of that today. Now we had, even though these are running on the same platform, we had two different engines that were running this. So the LIMS workflow engine was separate from the experimental engine. We decided to harmonize this in 2018 into one solution. And this turned out to be a smart move for us. We really took off in 2018. The workflows are more visual now, but one of the big benefits here is now you have a single administrative experience. So the same way you build LIMS workflows is very similar to how a scientist builds out ad hoc experiments. So in the same single technology foundation, you can have one skill set to service the scientist and service the lab at your organization, all built on the same platform. Now we're starting to get into the area that I'm most excited about, which is, and John talked about a lot of data. So everything we've done thus far is around collecting data. But now, what are you going to do with that? I mean, you want to make that actionable, right? So it's about interpreting the data. So we introduced Exemplar Informatics in 2019, and now in 2020, the next thing we understood is we have to understand the science. In the LIMS world, I think the science is less pertinent. I mean, you have to track lab process. So understanding the science is not actually as critical as it is when you're talking about dealing with scientists and doing experimental work. Here you want to understand the science because you want to put things in there to supplement the science. So that the experiments they're doing in Exemplar are not just data tracking, but they're actually supplementing their work so that they can help them make discoveries, help them visualize data better, interpret the data better. And that's been a big push for us over the last 2 years, I'll say, is understanding the science. And we've done work in medicinal chemistry now, and I'll talk more about that. We have a plasmid viewer editor coming out. I'm extremely excited about this. A very powerful plasmid viewer editor where you can do your PCR primer design, et cetera. We've done a lot of work in high throughput purification, high throughput experimentation in like protein engineering pipelines, exotic entity registration, we'll talk about. And now we have this analytics data warehouse. So we've extended Exemplar Informatics into a data warehouse capability now where you can do these really powerful analytics right within Exemplar. And we're not pretending to be the only solution you're going to use for analytics. There's Spotfire and other tools, but we wanted to make it easy for scientists to do it right in the platform without necessarily having to go into an external tool all the time. Just some business level information. You know, Sapio is one of the few independent LIMS or ELN vendors left, and it's not due to lack of interest. We every week, private equity people are reaching out to Sapio to invest or buy the company, and this has been true for 5 years now. But we've never taken investment, even though we could, I'm sure, get lots of money. But that would change the emphasis of the company, I think. We're very keen on the mission here, which is making the product and platform as excellent as possible to accelerate drug discovery. And I think a shift towards sales and marketing in the past would not have been beneficial for the company or our customers. So we've been hyper-focused on the platform and making it better and easier to use. So if you haven't heard of us, that's why we haven't put a big emphasis on sales and marketing. We've been fortunate to have extremely good success, more than I ever would have dreamed of. But this has mostly been through referrals and success with customers that we have and growing within these organizations. But I think now the platform is where it needs to be, and we need to start emphasizing, what we can do. And you're going to hear a lot more about Sapio now because I think the tool is where I'm satisfied with it, as the chief scientist of the company. And I think it can really fulfill the mandate that the company is driven to support. And, we don't have investors in the formal sense like private equity firms or VCs, but these are investors, which is our customers. So we are where we're at today because of our customers. Not only do they license our product and help fund development, but they also challenge us and educate us on how we need to be better. And, and within our customer base, we greatly appreciate the patience they've had in some areas. Like, our ELN wasn't perfect, 2 years ago, but we don't sit still. We're not going to let that situation exist. We innovate quickly. We're going to continue to innovate quickly. I'm adamant that we want to have the easiest to use and the most powerful platform in terms of ELN LIMS on the earth, and we will continue to work fast and deliver improvements to the technology where we think it's going to, fulfill our mandate. So John talked about the digital lab. There's a lot of great materials out there now, some from Accenture. So I kind of lifted this, but I'm acknowledging them here at the bottom. This is their description of a lot of the important elements, and this correlates quite well with what John Conway was talking about in his slide. But the key thing here is we've been developing the digital lab before I knew what the digital lab was. I mean, it kind of just made sense to me that you want to have a platform first and foremost, and you want to have integrated LIMS, ELN, and SDMS. I mean, you're collecting all this data, having silos of data, having 5 LIMS and 3 ELNs and another SDMS, just doesn't make a lot of logical sense. In fact, that's what we see when we go into our pharma customers and even the biotechs, that they have all these different technologies, and it's created a huge problem. You really can't now have a digital lab because of all these different technologies. So we've been working hard to create a single platform that delivers on all these things. We recognize we're still going to have to integrate with others, and we're quite good at that. And where we have to do that, we do it. But where we can offer a single solution that's going to meet all these check boxes, we wanted to do it, and we've been doing that. That's what we've been doing for a decade now, is working towards this deliverable. And that's what, in fact, the Exemplar Seamless Lab is. So it starts with a platform. I think we got lucky by starting with the platform, and I'll talk about why in a moment. But the platform is actually application agnostic. You can build any type of application on it. You could build a CRM on it, like a competitor with Salesforce, or an accounting application. So that's the robustness that we wanted to have in the platform. This kind of capable platform that anything we build on top of it will inherit all the implicit capabilities. And that starts with the data model. Data model configuration is not something we generally can demo extensively, and it's kind of bad that we can't, because it's actually a critical differentiator and critically important to being agile and adapting to the future. A lot of products have some level of configurable data model, but the devil's in the details, and be able to handle all kind of complex relationships between entities in your system. This is the stuff we're really good at. We've been doing this for 15 years now. We have a configurable data model right at the beginning. And we think we stand alone in this area, and this allows us to do things with no programming, just configuration of the product. So you never have to worry about whether we can represent the data you want in our system. We have a rules engine in our product. Don't have time to show it today, but you can configure rules in the system that can enforce data requirements, take other actions based on conditions in the system with no programming. We also have a world-class API programmatic interface in the product. Unique to Exemplar is we have charting inside the product. So you can do charting on any table of data in Exemplar. We're going to show that in the demo today. Again, why do that? Because scientists are looking at data tables in Exemplar. If you say, well, now you have to go to Tableau or some other tool to visualize that data, it's not making them efficient. If we're going to accelerate drug discovery, and we can put a visualization right in the product for the scientists immediately, then they can do it right there inside the product. Why not let them do that? That's why we did it. I mentioned the integrated data warehouse. This is for analytics. So we can do amazing things with massaging the data any way you want through scripting, Python scripting, Groovy scripting, and pump it into an analytic, a statistic, whether it's a logistic regression, curve fitting, or neural networks. We have all that supported in the product. John mentioned FAIR. If you want to be FAIR compliant, that's great. All the data should be represented in a way that's searchable. But then you have to have the search tools in the product to actually get to the data. We have tremendous targeted search, and this allows you to search across your data, across the enterprise, LIMS, ELN, SDMS, all in one search. And there's no technical skill required. You don't have to be a database administrator or go to the IT group to do it. A scientist can learn to do this and do it right in the interface. How do the data views look in the product? We want to present rich data visualizations, but give the customer the ability to configure those. We provide rich visualizations out of the box, but we let people configure that in the system the way they want. We believe in collaboration, so integrated chats is critically important. We have great data table functionality. What does this mean? It means when you're looking at tables of data, what can you do? Can you filter it? Can you group things? Can you do multi-row, multi-column pasting from Excel into the table? I'm not talking about an Excel to an Excel type pasting. Of course, products that have spreadsheets in their tool can do that. I'm talking about structured data. So in our structured data tables, you can paste multi-column, multi-row. No other product, including outside the life science space that I've seen, allows that. So that makes it more efficient for data operations within the product. and then wrapping all this in permissions. We have permissions around groups, individuals, as far as data level access, as well as features and functions in the product. So you can be comfortable letting a CRO from China come into the product and do work because you can control what they can see and what actions they can perform in the product through permissions. So that's the agnostic platform we built. Then we started to flesh out the LIMS over the last 15 years. We put the ELN on the platform, and we have SDMS capability in the product as well. If we had started, and I'll talk about why I think it worked to our benefit, if we had started with a purpose-built ELN, let's say we said we're going to create an ELN, I think we could have created in 6 months a tremendous, easy-to-use, functional ELN that the market would have liked. But then if we decide, okay, now we want to put a LIMS on here, and now we want to make a platform that's agnostic, I think that becomes very hard. If you're bolting things onto something that wasn't originally designed to do, the design gets away from you very quickly. So you can start off with a very clean interface and simple, but once you start adding on a bunch of functionality, it's hard to make it scale. It's hard to keep the interface clean and usable, and you can end up with a kind of Frankenstein type product. So I'm very glad that we actually started with a platform and then decided to build the applications on top of that. And we've had to work to simplify, as I mentioned, the ELN to kind of make sure the interface is as easy to use, even though it's very capable, so that people can go in and just start using it right away. Where we can, we build out-of-the-box solutions on top of the platform, on top of LIMS, ELN, and SDMS. Sample registration is one of those examples. We have a full, complete bioanalytical pipeline. Essentially, we're competing with Watson LIMS here. If you're interested in BA pipelines, I suggest you look at our solution. It's very good. NGS, PCR. PCR is obviously very common right now with COVID testing. NGS is obviously a hot spot as well and has been for years. We have a complete stability and formulations in the product as well now. Histopathology, particularly for like large animal studies, tracking your embedding, sectioning, staining, et cetera. Some of the more recent things we're doing is parallel medicinal chemistry. We're very excited about that. Protein engineering. Here's where scalability, and I haven't mentioned much about scalability. John mentioned it. You have the data volumes now are huge. And one thing we know about in information technology, the data volumes are not going to become less. They're always going to become more. I can predict that very easily, right? It's always going to be more. It's never going to be less. So the product has to be able to scale. We're doing protein engineering at a top 10 pharma, and we're doing an NGS pipeline where they're taking all the libraries and then they're sequencing them. And we have to track 45 plates with 96 samples through a workflow at sample level detail. So just making the workflow run fast is very challenging. But at the end of that pipeline, we're loading 8 to 9 million sequences into Exemplar in less than 10 minutes. And this will be run repeatedly, right? They're going to run these experiments over and over. So collecting these tens of millions of sequences and tracking sample level detail through the workflow with 45 plates, that's a special kind of requirement. And all the while retaining permission-based access, group level privileges, making this scale is a big challenge. And that's what we've worked hard on over the last 15 years. And I think we've solved that problem now. Molecular biology, I'll be talking about that. And we do a lot more. These are the out-of-the-box things we have, but we have more that we've done in specific implementations for customers as well. All right, so let's talk about some of the ELN-specific features. We have a truly collaborative ELN. I cannot overemphasize how important this is and what we believe is important for labs and scientists. We support in the ELN, we're going to demonstrate it today, any number of scientists collaborating on the same experiment at the same time. So you can have 15 scientists. It's probably not realistic that you're going to have that, but let's say you have 15 scientists can be working together in the experiment at the same time. I'm talking about real-time collaboration. So not I'm in and then Aaron comes in and then Jim comes in and then Chad comes in. We can be in there together working at the same time, editing, changing things. We have full granularity as far as who did what. So you don't have to worry about auditability, traceability. We track everything that happens and who did it, when they did it. So this is true collaboration. And you can even use the tool as an ideation tool in that sense. And the other really important thing here is we have real-time data updates. So it's the Google Docs of ELN. If you've ever used Google Docs, you know if someone else is editing, you can see that they're in there and you can see their edits in real time. You don't have to exit, leave, come back, refresh. The same is true with Exemplar. We're the only product that offers these capabilities, both of these, in our product, and we'll show that later. You have free-form typing, checklists, formatting of your text, image pasting, image annotations in the product. Full materials, plate, and storage management are on the platform, and proper and visual, by the way, in the system. We've integrated spreadsheet and docs embedded right in your experiment that you can edit and work with. But we also have structured data. This is very important. If you want to do targeted searching, anything you want to do targeted searching, you cannot capture in a spreadsheet engine. And this is not just true with Exemplar, it's true with any other tool. If they have a spreadsheet engine in their product, you should be aware anything you're putting in that will not be searchable in a targeted way. You need structured data for that, and we have the ability to easily capture structured data in the product. As I mentioned, we have charting everywhere in the product. Any table of data you can chart. We have chemistry, compound, reaction drawing, stoichiometry. We've integrated with ChemDraw and ChemAxon. We have a more extensive integration with ChemAxon, working with Marvin.js and doing stoichiometry, registries, et cetera. You can also link and clone your experiments. And we have a semantic capable system, so we can work with vendors like SciBite for ontologies, and we're FAIR compliant. So the application areas we're seeing with our product, entity registration, it used to be very easy. You had blood, sputum, DNA, et cetera. Now the game has changed. You have these much more complex entities, antibody drug conjugates, arms, PROTACs, sequences, compounds. And the registration is more complicated because you need to detect does a similar thing already exist in the system or the same thing. And that's not a straightforward string field comparison. You have to actually have a more elaborate check. And we do this in our system now. And the other key thing here is you don't want to repeat things. So, for example, on the right side of the screen here, you can see we have an ADC conjugate. Here's the conjugate. It has a Helm notation, but it has these components. And if we register another conjugate, and it has the same compound in it, the same small molecule, we want to detect does that small molecule already exist, and if it does, use the existing one to attach to the drug conjugate representation, because we don't want to have duplicate data in the system. We want to have reuse things that are properly referenced by different entities in the product. So we think rich visuals are very important, as you can see here. This is a screenshot from within Exemplar, so you can see we have this kind of hierarchy of representation, and we can have these rich visuals that show alongside that. High throughput experimentation, a lot of times you're doing an experiment per well where you're trying to synthesize chemistry. It's a witch's brew of catalysts and ligands and solvents, et cetera, and temperature, pressure. So we actually have a workflow for this in Exemplar, starting with the design of experiment, which you're doing in external tools, and then you give us the design, and we will, including the conditions, and we will automate your plate setup in the product, and then give you a visual display of that, as you can see here. We have full materials tracking in the product, liquid handler, so we can communicate with the liquid handler to tell it what to do in the product, and run the HPLC load, and display the data in a heat map. So getting a visual representation of the results of your chemistry experiment, showing two metrics in the system, really All right, so we're doing molecular biology. In October, we're going to be releasing our Plasmid Viewer editor. You'll be able to view and edit linear and circular DNA. You're getting a preview look at it here. And the key thing is that high scalability. We've loaded 3 million base pair sequence and annotated fully. And our annotations are on the outside, so you can we actually show, in this case, this crazy plasmid that has 3 million sequences fully annotated, and you can read every annotation. It's extremely busy, of course, but to do that in 10 seconds, the developers did an amazing job on that. You have your restriction sites, reading frames, do CRISPR analysis, design and construct, PCR primer functions, automated and manual, Gibson assembly, all these things you expect to have in a first-class DNA viewer editor is going to be available in this tool, release date October. So we're very excited. And this will probably be freely available in our free version of the ELN that we have now available on the web for access. What we call the Bronze Edition is free for academics, and they'll have access to this tool. And on the LIMS side, we have the complicated stuff you do in LIMS is not just building out a single workflow, it's actually tracking process, which is a concatenation of many workflows. First, we have a work queue dashboard. We always know what work needs to be done in the lab, and we present that in a visual, interactive dashboard. But how do you build the workflows? You drag and drop build them in Exemplar. You can configure complicated workflows through drag and drop. How do you build a process? The process is a concatenation of these workflows. We have this visual builder of complicated workflows. And you can do conditional branching, as you see here in your workflow. We track turnaround times. This is particularly important for clinical labs. And our LIMS is being used in the leading clinical labs in the world and some of the leading R&D labs in the world as well. Speaking of clinical, you might be surprised to know that we're actually interested in the delivery of drugs. So you've created these great drugs or molecular diagnostic tests. How do you deliver these to your customers? Well, it starts with CRM. So we have a full CRM module that the sales representatives can use to track the sales of molecular diagnostic tests or drugs to providers and patients. And we have a complete order management module as part of that. Order management tracking is actually quite complicated, especially for molecular diagnostic labs where you have to track order deficiencies, do things like reflex testing, et cetera. And we can track all the interactions with the providers. There's a lot of graphical timelines on communication. There's integration with calendaring and email systems built right into the solution. And we can create the patient reporting as well. We're doing this at our largest clinical customers, where we create the product of these companies. In the case of a diagnostic lab, is that patient report. You want to have a beautiful, visual, informative report, and we can generate those right out of Exemplar. You can always see where things are at in the pipeline. So a physician might want to know, hey, I sent this request in for some lab test. Where's it at in the pipeline? We can visually present that to them in the product. I mentioned the data analytics warehouse. So here we're showing a screenshot of a dose response. You can search across the entire system and then run an analytic on it. As I mentioned, this can be a no-code search that you're doing with our built-in search tools and then pumping that into an analytic that we have out of the box. Or you can create Python scripts. A lot of data analysts are Python experts. We also have Groovy scripting in the product and feed that into an analytic. We also have the common stats you would expect: t-tests, logistic regressions, other regressions, essentially curve fits, and many others. And because we have our statistics basically rolled into the product, and then also neural networks. We also have Amazon SageMaker. So if you want to do deep learning neural networks, we can pass data to SageMaker and then have it do the analytic and then return the result back into Exemplar. We can also export data results into Excel. So this is the digital lab, a harmonized LIMS and ELN on a single platform. And the key is when they're on the same platform is you have this unified data for samples, your containers like your plates and storage. Your structured data is consistently represented across the system. Your doc storage, which can include images as well. Your materials inventory is tracked, your storage, and your instrument data, all on a single platform. And if it's all there, and the platform provides searching, a strong API for getting data in and out if you want to work with other tools, and visualization of the data and analytics, this is kind of the digital lab, right, that people are talking about. So now you can actually use the information in the system to accelerate discovery, understand the information you've been collecting laboriously, without a lot of millions of dollars. Essentially, in fact, it boils down to tens of millions of dollars of trying to integrate systems, get them to talk to each other, and then build analytics on that, visualizations on that. Very hard to do. I haven't seen it really work anywhere yet.